I know it's warm in here. Obviously, I apologize. I'm hot too. I hear they turn the air on, I guess, because I hear it humming, but I don't know how fast it can get us cool before we finish. So I'll try to go fast, inshallah. But while making sure we cover the material that needs to be covered. طيب, okay. Bismillah. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم. أما بعد. طيب, so we're beginning الباب الرابع, the fourth section من الكتاب الثاني, from the second chapter of the book Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah في المسائل الفقهية by Al-Imaam Muhammad ibn Ali Ash-Shawkaanee rahimahullah ta'ala. And last week we discussed the shurut al-salat, the preconditions for the prayer. We discussed shurut al-salat. That was the third chapter of the third section in this second chapter, this chapter of as-salat. Okay. So who can remember? It seems like it's always every week we have a different group of people. It's never the same. It really is like every week it's the same amount of people, but it's like a completely different set of people. So I don't know if you all are tag teaming or something and exchanging information at home. But last week we discussed the shurut. So does anyone remember any of the preconditions for the prayer, or even if you weren't here, do you know any of the shurut, the preconditions of the prayer? Okay, an-niyyah, of course. Someone mentioned wudu, so we'll say purity, at-tahara, being in a state of purification. Okay. Istiqbal al-qibla, facing the direction of the qibla, facing the Kaaba, of course. Yep. Location. What about the location? So that wouldn't be location. Actually, it's something else. It's what you're saying is close, but it's not location. The way Imam Ash-Shawkaanee explained it, he said taharatul al-badan wal-thawb wal-makan. That the place that you pray, and your clothing and your body must be free of any of the najasat, any of the impurities. Okay? So remember those three things. Your body itself, meaning your skin, your body. All right? Your clothing that you're wearing when you're in the prayer, and the place where you're going to pray must all be pure of any of a najasat. And we talked about najasat in the Kitaab al-Tahara, the chapter on purification. So that was way back, But if you have to keep these things together. So we talked about previously a najasat, and we talked about, like, for example, lu'ab kalb, the saliva of a dog, damu hayd, menstrual blood. Okay. What else do we say of a najasat? Al-bawl, urine, feces, al-ghayt, feces, roth, the dung of animals, etc. All these type of things. Okay. So all these things, these impurities, they cannot be on your body, they cannot be on your clothing, and they cannot be in the place where you're going to pray. Is that understood? So that is of the shurut, of the preconditions of the prayer. Okay. And I will remind you again that if you have any of those impurities on your body or on your clothing, that does not break your wudu. Those are not nawaqidul wudu, things that break wudu. We talked about a najasat, the things that are things that ritually will defile you, but they are not the same as those things that are what are considered nawaqidul wudu, the things that break wudu. So in other words, if you get any of those things that we mentioned of impurities on you, on your clothing or what have you, that does not break your wudu. Rather, what it means is you have to remove that. You have to either cleanse that off of you, remove it by cleaning it, or you have to get rid of it and exchange it for something else, right? If you have a garment that has, for example, dog feces on it, which is an impurity, all right, or menstrual blood, if it's on your garment or on your body, you have to clean it off, or you have to remove that garment. But that does not mean you have to repeat the wudu. It does not break the wudu. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. So those are preconditions. Okay. So we said facing the qibla, the person must have the intention for the prayer that they're praying. We said that they must be in a state of purity, wudu, as one brother said, they must have in a ritual state of purity. We said that the body, the clothing, and the place of prayer must be free of any of the najasat, of the impurities. What else? Satr al-awra, the person must cover their private parts. Okay, and we said the awrah for the man is what between the navel to the knee to his knees. Okay, it's between his navel to his knees, as the Prophet mentioned in the authentic hadith that the explainer Imam Ash-Shawkaanee mentioned in the notes, that the Prophet said what is between the surah from the belly button, the navel to ar-rukbah, to the knee, that is awrah for the man. That's his private parts. Okay, and in another narration, the Prophet he mentioned that al-fakhd, the thigh, is awrah. Okay, so the man's thigh must be covered, and whatever is between his belly button, as we say, navel, that's belly button, what is between that and his knees, that is awrah. That must be covered when he's in prayer. Also, along with that, the Prophet said, none of you should pray while not having anything on his shoulders. So the shoulders also must be covered as part of the awrah in the salat. The man should not pray with his shoulders uncovered. Okay. And then he said in reference to the woman, the awrah of the woman in prayer is everything, he said, other than her wajh and kaffain, her face and her two hands. Okay. And we talked about the feet, and we said there's a difference of opinion about it. The majority of the scholars said the woman should cover her feet when she's in prayer because of a narration from Salama radiallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her. But Sheikh Muqbil bin Hadi al-Wadi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he was a scholar of hadith scholar in Yemen, he's deceased now. He said that this narration of Salama is not sahih marfu'an ila Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's not authentic as a narration of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's not authentic back to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he said, really, there's no clear evidence from the Prophet that he commanded the woman in the prayer to cover her feet. He said there's nothing authentic from the Prophet about that. So he said, even though it's safer for the woman to cover her feet, because this the Jamhur, the majority of the scholars held this opinion, okay, and it's safer. But he said, if the woman happens to pray, and her feet are not covered, he said it does not invalidate her prayer. Her prayer is acceptable like that because there's no authentic narration to prove that it's not valid. Okay. So what else? Covering the awrah. Dukhul al-waqt, the time of the prayer. It has to. You cannot pray the prayer outside of their times. Okay. In other words, you can't pray. You cannot pray Maghrib before it comes in, or you cannot pray. For example, you can't pray if it's like 11 o'clock in the day, and you say, "Well, I'm going to be working, when Dhuhr comes in, so I'm going to go ahead and pray Dhuhr now." You cannot. It's not accepted like that. It's not your salat is ghayr sahiha. It's not correct like that. Okay. Because the prayer time did not enter. What else? Of preconditions. Shurut. Okay. Al-Islam, that the person must be a Muslim. Okay. Because nothing is accepted of the acts of worship that are performed by a non-Muslim until they first accept Islam. They must first establish Tawheed, that they're worshiping Allah. They must make the declaration of faith and enter into Islam. Okay. So Islam is first, and then he said al-aql, which means sanity, okay? That the person who is insane is not obligated to pray. And not only that, but a person who's praying and they do not know what they're saying and don't have their reasoning, they don't know what's going on, then the prayer is not accepted from you in that way, okay? And there's a narration from the Prophet, he said, "Laysa lil mar'i min salatihi illa ma yaqilu minha." He said the person will not get from his prayer except for what he understands of it, okay? So al-aql is a condition that the person should aql here meaning sanity and reason. They understand what's going on. They're aware. They know, they have their sanity about them, their normal intellect, okay? Then a tamyiz, he mentioned. Tamyiz, we mentioned this last week also, that the person must be mumayyiz. What is tamyiz? What did we say this meant?
It comes to age, like age or
exactly. They're the age of discernment, we say. Not necessarily responsibility, because we talked about last week that there's a difference between al-bulugh wa tamyiz. Okay, one who is baligh and one who is mumayyiz. There's a difference. Okay, the bulugh is the age of puberty, and that's the age of responsibility. When someone reaches the age of puberty, that's when acts of Islam, ritual acts of Islam, become obligatory upon them. What's the dalil? What's the proof? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Rufi' al-qalam an thalath." The pen is lifted from 3 people, and he said is as-sabi hatta yablugh. He says the child until when they reach the age of puberty. Meaning whatever a child does before the age of puberty, that is not written down as a sin against them, okay, as a bad deed. But once they reach the age of puberty, then they're responsible for the actions in Islam that adults are responsible for, of prayer and fasting, etc. Okay, the obligations. Okay, so tayyib. So what is the age of tamyiz? 7 years old. We said it's 7. And what was the dalil? What was the evidence?
Prophet ordered them to teach them how to pray.
He said, He said, "Muru awladakum bis-salat bi sab'a sinin." Okay. He said, command your children to pray when they're 7 years old. وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَشْرٌ. When spank them about it if they reach the age of 10 if they're not praying. Okay. And he said, وَفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَهُمْ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, and separate between them in the beds. Okay, this is authentic hadith. But this hadith, the Prophet is showing. He said, مُرُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَهُمْ سَبْعَ سِنِينَ عُمْرُهُمْ سَبْعَ سِنِينَ. He said, command the children to pray when they're 7 years old. Does this mean that the children are obligated to pray once they reach the age of 7? No. And the proof of it is the other hadith where the Prophet said, رُفِعَ الْقَلَمْ عَنْ ثَلَاثَ. The pen is lifted from 3 people. And he said, الصَّبِي حَتَّى يَبْلُغ. The child until when he reaches the age of puberty. And who are the other people? He said, النَّائِمْ حَتَّى يَسْتَيْقِظ. And he said, the sleeping person until they wake up. Okay. And then he said, الْمَجْنُونَ حَتَّى يَفِيقْ. And the person who's insane until they regain their sanity. Those 3 people, the insane person, okay, the person who is asleep, and the person who is a child, nothing that they do of deeds are written down as sins against them. Okay, until they either come back to their sanity, or until they reach the age of puberty for the child, or until they wake up for the person who's sleeping. When that happens, then everything is what they do of deeds, good or bad, is written down for or against them. Okay, so why did the Prophet say command the children to pray when they're 7 and spank them when they're 10? What's the reason for that? It's ta'deeban. It's for training. It's to prepare them, to get them ready, so that when they do reach the age of puberty, they don't just have to all of a sudden out of the blue start praying 5 times a day and they've never been doing it before. It will be too difficult upon them. So he's teaching them to give the children what we call ta'deeb, which is training, disciplining them and getting them ready, tamreen, getting them ready for it. Okay. Okay, so that's just a quick review. We'll go ahead and go into our subject for today. All right, so today we're doing Bab Kayfiyyat as-Salah, the chapter regarding the manner of the prayer, how to make the prayer. And Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, he said in this bab, this section, he said, لا تكون شرعية إلا بالنية وأركانها كلها مفروضة أو مفترضة في النسخة إلا قعود التشهد الأوسط والاستراحة ولا يجب من أذكارها إلا التكبير والفاتحة في كل ركعة ولو كان مؤتما والتشهد الأخير والتسليم وما عدا ذلك فالسنن وهي الرفع في المواضع الأربع والضم والتوجه بعد التكبيرة وتعوذ والتأمين وقراءة غير الفاتحة معها والتشهد الأوسط والأذكار الواردة في كل ركن والاستكثار من الدعاء بخيري الدنيا والآخرة بما ورد وبما لم يرد. So he says, so we're going to go through that's the whole of that section. I just read the whole thing, but now we're going to break down and talk about each thing that he said. So he said, لا تكون شرعية إلا بالنية, and we talked about this last week, that the prayer is not legislated, meaning it's not valid, unless it is began with the proper intentions, with niyyah. Okay, and we said that actually this is from the section of shurut. This actually would be included in the previous bab, the previous section. Okay, and we mentioned that a niyyah is of the preconditions of the prayer, that you must have the proper intentions. Okay, and he said, wa arkanuha kulluha. Here it says muftarida. In another nuskha, another wording of it, manuscript of it, he said mafruda. It has the same meaning. وَأَرْكَانُهَا كُلُّهَا مَفْرُوضَةً إِلَّا قُعُودَ التَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوْسَطِ. He said, and its pillars, it's arkan. So we're going to use some terminologies here as we're talking about these categories of the prayer. As we talk about Kayfiyyat as-Salat, the manners of the prayer, we're going to have categories for certain things. We're going to classify them. What are the acts of the prayer will be classified into categories. Okay, and the first thing he's talking about here, he says arkan, which means pillars, like we say Arkaan Islam, the pillars of Islam, Arkaan Iman, the pillars of faith. Okay, so the Salat has arkan, pillars. The singular of that word is rukn, okay, a pillar. Okay, and a rukn in the prayer or in an act of worship, when we were talking about fiqh, it means something that the thing is not valid, it is not correct unless it is done. It is not accepted. Okay, the prayer, in other words, we're talking about these arkan now. These are things that if you don't do them, your prayer is not correct. It is not accepted. It's not valid. All right? But we're not talking about preconditions. We're talking about things within the prayer now. You're actually in the prayer. You met all the preconditions for prayer. Everything is legitimate and correct, and you can go ahead and enter the prayer. Everything is valid like it's supposed to be. And now you're in the prayer. In the prayer, there are things that if you don't do them, your prayer is not valid. It's not accepted. It's not correct. All right? Those are called arkan. Okay? So he says it's arkan, they're obligatory. All of them are mandatory. He said, except for illa qu'ud tashahhud al-awsat, except for the sitting for the middle tashahhud. Except for the sitting of the middle tashahhud. Who knows what he's talking about when he says middle tashahhud here?
For the prayers that is more than 2 raka'ah.
Right, for the prayer, exactly, very good. Both of you all are correct. For the prayers that where there are more than 2 rak'ahs, where you're going to make more than one tashahhud, okay? So in other words, for Salatul Fajr, there's only one tashahhud, it's a Tashahhud al-Akhira, okay, the last one, okay? A Tashahhud al-Akhir, that last one, okay? But then a Tashahhud al-Akhir, now. So then, but for other prayers, where there are 3 rak'ahs, like Maghrib, or 4 rak'ahs, like Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha, you're going to make more than one tashahhud. You're going to do a Tashahhud al-Akhir, which is at the end of the prayer, before you close out the prayer. But after the first 2 rak'ahs, you're going to perform a tashahhud also, all right? And that is what he's calling here a Tashahhud al-Awsat, the middle tashahhud, okay? The middle tashahhud, meaning it's in the middle of the prayer, but it's not the last one. He's saying that one is not a rukn. That tashahhud that you make the first, like if you're going to pray a prayer, let's give an example. We're praying Salatul Dhuhr, okay? After 2 rak'ahs, after you pray 2 rak'ahs, you're going to sit for tashahhud, all right? And we'll talk about a tashahhud. We'll go into detail what that is, but I'm just using that terminology now, and I'll explain it in a moment. But you're going to sit before you stand up for the 3rd rak'ah. For that 3rd unit of prayer, you're going to sit after that 2nd one, and you're going to perform what's called a tashahhud, and we'll describe it here momentarily. That sitting for a tashahhud there, that you do after that 2nd rak'ah, he's saying that's not a rukn. It's not a pillar of the prayer. I mean, if you leave it out, there's something you can do to make up for it. The prayer can still be considered valid, okay? And we'll get to that too, all right? Now, tashahhud, a tashahhud literally means to do the shahada. It means to make the testimony of faith. And the reason for it is that in their words that the Prophet taught the Muslims to say, taught his companions to say, when you sit for this tashahhud, okay? And in it is that you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, which is our testimony of faith. I testify that there's nothing that deserves to be worshipped as a deity or God except Allah, and I testify or I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. You say that when you do that sitting as a part of the wording that the Prophet gave it for us to say, okay? And that's the reason it's called a tashahhud is because that shahada is in there. So every time you pray, every time you make salat, you're taking shahada. You're making the declaration of faith every time you make salat, okay? You're making the shahada, all right? So the wording of it, there are different narrations regarding the tashahhud. Shaykh al-Albani brings about 5 different wordings for it in his book, Sifatul Salatul Nabi, the description of the Prophet's prayer. The most famous is the tashahhud of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. It's in the Sahih al-Bukhari and other narrations as well. It's at-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu. Assalamu alayka ayyuha nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Okay? This is known as the tashahhud of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. May Allah be pleased with him. But what a lot of people don't know, and Jibril may be able to tell us more about this, but there's a narration in Sahih Bukhari in that same chapter where Abdullah ibn Mas'ud goes on after narrating that. He said, Allamani Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam a tashahhud. The Prophet taught me a tashahhud, just like he would teach me a surah from the Quran. He said, wa kaffayya bayna kaffayhi, and my 2 palms will be between his 2 hands. And he taught me to say this. But so that one I just said, at-tahiyyatu lillah, the greetings of servitude are for Allah. Wa-tayyibatu, and the good things, wa-salawatu, the prayers, and wa-tayyibatu, and all good things, all right? And then he said, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you, O messenger of Allah, and blessings, okay? Peace and blessings be upon you, O messenger of Allah. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin, and peace be upon us and upon the righteous worshippers of Allah. And then you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I testify there's nothing to be worshipped as God except Allah, and I testify that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. Then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud went on in that narration. He said, وَلَمَّا قُبِضَ قُلْنَا السَّلَامُ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ. He said, but when he died, when the Prophet died, after he died, قُلْنَا السَّلَامُ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ. We would say Assalamu ala nabi. We didn't say Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I know a lot of people memorize it like that because it's in the little salat books like that. Okay, the little book you how to pray, and you get your new Muslim or whatever, or you're just learning prayer how to pray, and they have it in there. It'll have when you're saying it, At-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi, like that. Peace be upon you, O Messenger of Allah. But he said, but when the Prophet died, we stopped saying peace be upon you, O Messenger of Allah, but we just said Assalamu ala nabi. May peace be upon the Prophet. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and mercy and blessings. Okay? Why?
Because you're not calling him and when he's not.
He's deceased.
Yeah.
You know, you're not speaking to him now. He was in this grave. All right. So we don't right exactly like you said. You're not speaking to him like in a dua. Speaking to him like we don't make dua to speak to someone who's deceased like that. So and also there's a narration. I want to say Sheikh Al-Albani mentioned that there's a narration from Aisha similar to this. It was Aisha or Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas. I can't remember. But definitely that narration was from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He said, وَلَمَّا قُبِضَ قُلْنَا السَّلَامُ عَلَى النَّبِي. Okay. Then there's the Tashahhud of Abdullah ibn Abbas. He said, التحيات المباركات الصلوات الطيبات لله السلام على النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. The wording is a little different. Then there's one from Umar. التحيات لله التحيات لله الزكيات لله الطيبات لله الصلوات لله السلام على النبي ورحمة الله. So the wordings differ a little bit, but the rest of it is all the same. Okay, and there are about 5 of them that Shaykh Al-Albani mentions in Sifat al-Salat al-Nabi, and he says that all of the chains of narration for all of them are authentic. But the one that's most well known, the one that's most mashhur, is the one of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But any of them you use, and it's good. Albani mentions in Sifat al-Salat al-Nabi that it's good to rotate between them if you can learn them. To say, memorize which ones if you can, and say them alternate between them, because that is from the Sunnah. Because the Prophet taught it those different ways to his companions. So saying it all of those ways are from the Sunnah. So to more correctly follow the Sunnah is that you learn the different ways he said it and alternate between them. Like this. Allah Ta'ala a'lam. Okay, that was a side note, but that's what the tashahhud is. Okay. So then he goes on. He says he's talking about the things that are not arkaan, that are not pillars of the prayer from those positions and things like this, the actual station positions in the prayer. So he says that first tashahhud, the first or the middle tashahhud we'll call it, he said is not a pillar of the prayer. Okay. He says, well, istiraha. There's a sitting that's called jalsatul istiraha, the sitting of rest. Okay, and that's the sitting that you do between, before standing between 2 raka'ahs. Like you pray 1 raka'ah, okay, and before you stand up for the second raka'ah, there's a sitting what's called jalsatul istiraha, the sitting of rest. He's saying this also is not a rukn, it's not a pillar of the prayer. Okay. Going back to that one other thing I forgot to mention about this tashahhud. Going back to the tashahhud, there's a lot to say about the tashahhud. In the notes here, he says, "Qu'ud tashahhud al-awsat wajib." He says sitting for that middle tashahhud, the first one that we talked about, where after 2 rak'ahs you would sit, and then you say this at-tahiyatu lillahi ila akhiri to the end of it. Okay, it's not of the arkaan, it's not a pillar of the prayer. But in footnotes he says it's wajib, it's obligatory. So now we're going to make a distinction. I'm bringing another term to you. We said there are going to be categories for the different positions and actions in the prayer. They have categories, okay? They have rulings for them in reference to their importance, in reference to implementing them in the prayer, okay? So you have things that are arkaan. Those are pillars. Those are things that if you leave them out, the prayer is not accepted like that. The prayer is not valid to leave that thing out, okay? You cannot leave out a rukn of the prayer, all right? If you do, the prayer is not correct. You would have to pray it over, all right? Now the next set of things are waajibaat, obligations. And this is what he's mentioning about this tashahhud al-awsat, this middle tashahhud. He said it's not a rukn, but it's wajib. The waajibaat, those are things that you must do them in the prayer. There's some type of command to do them. But if you leave it out, it's not as severe as leaving out a rukn, a pillar. But if you do leave it out, you have to do something to make up for its deficiency, for missing it. And that is what we call sujood sahw, prostration of forgetfulness. And there are 2 prostrations that the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions to make at the backside, at the end of the prayer, to make up for something that you left out that's important. Okay, for absent-mindedness, you forgot to do it or what have you. And this is one of those things, a tashahhud al-awsat. It's of the waajibaat. Okay, it's not of the arkaan. If you leave it out, your prayer is still valid. But if you leave it out, if you forgot to do it, and you stood up for the 3rd rak'ah, then at the end, if you remember at the end that you did it, it's like that, then what you would do is you would make 2 sujood sahw. We'll get to that. There's a section in the book that's jumping ahead that talks about sujood sahw, how to make these prostrations of forgetfulness. Okay, so I'm just pointing out to you that there are arkaan and then there are waajibaat. Okay, waajibaat you can make up for them by making 2 prostrations at the end of the prayer. Arkaan, if it's a rukn of the prayer, you can't make up for it by just making 2 sajdas at the end of the prayer. Okay, all right. And then the last category of things that we'll talk about are sunan. Okay? And the sunan are things that are what we call mustahabbat. They're recommended. They're recommended. They add extra blessings to the prayer. They're good. It's commendable to do this. It's desired to do it. But if you leave it out, the prayer is valid, and you don't have to do any prayer prostrations or forgetfulness for not doing it. Okay, all right. So we have 4 things actually. We have shurut, preconditions. Those are things you have to do before you can begin praying. Those things must be in order before you can enter the prayer, before your prayer can be valid, before you can even start praying. Those are shurut, preconditions. Then you have arkaan. Arkaan are pillars. Those things are things within the prayer that you have to do them. If you don't do them, the prayer is not valid. Okay, within the prayer now. Then you have waajibaat. Those are things that are commanded. You should do them, but if you don't do it, the prayer you can make up for it by making 2 prostrations of forgetfulness at the end of the prayer. And then you have sunan. Those are things that they're not commanded to do. There may be narrations showing that the Prophet did it, but he didn't necessarily command it. But it's recommended for your prayer to be closer to the prayer of the Prophet. If you do it, you get extra blessings. It's better. But if you leave it out, it's no sin upon you, and the prayer is still valid. Okay, you understand? So we have shurut, arkaan, waajibaat, and sunan. All right. Okay. So tayyib, in reference to, so he says that qu'ud li-tashahhud al-awsat, sitting for that first tashahhud, he says wajib. It's obligatory. Liqawlihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, due to the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إذا قعدتم في كل ركعتين فقولوا التحيات لله الحديث رواه أحمد وهو صحيح. So he says it's obligatory to make that sitting for tashahhud, because the Prophet ﷺ said, when one of you sit after every 2 rakahs, when he sits after those two rakahs, he must say, then you should say at-tahiyatu lillahi, and then he taught them to say the tashahhud, the words of the tashahhud. This hadith is reported by Imam Ahmed, and it has a sahih chain of narration. So he says, فَهَذَا أَمْرٌ, so this is a command. وَالْأَمْرُ يُفِيدُ الْوُجُوبِ, and a command shows us that thing is obligatory. This is from the rules of usul al-fiqh, الْأَمْرُ يُفِيدُ الْوُجُوبِ. And he says, and it can be made up for by making prostrations of sahwa, لِمَنْ تَرَكَهُ sahwan, for whoever leaves it off absent for forgetting it, just like we said. Okay. And he says, وَتُبْتَلُ الصَّلَاةُ بِتَرْكِهِ عَمْدًا, and the prayer is considered invalid if you leave it off intentionally. If you intentionally leave it off, then the prayer is not correct like that. Okay. But if you absent-mindedly, if you forget to leave it off, which is strange, you see things like this, and you're like, well, why would someone intentionally leave it off if you know that you're supposed to do it? But anyway, but that's there. It's in the book. I'm just reading what's in the book. It's there. If you intentionally leave it off, he's saying your prayer. He says, "Tubtalu as-salatu." The prayer becomes invalid like that. All right. But once again, like we said, because you can make up for it by making 2 prostrations of forgetfulness, that's clear. That's clearly showing us that it's not a rukn. Because a rukn, a pillar of the prayer, you can't make up for it by just making 2 sujood sahwa at the end. Sajdatay sahwa, 2 prostrations of forgetfulness. All right. So then, as far as the sitting of rest, the sitting of jalsatul istiraha, the sitting of rest, he says, قبل القيام إلى الركعة الثانية والرابعة. He said, this is before you stand up for the the second rak'ah, or before you stand up for a 4th rak'ah. Can you all follow that? I know I'm speaking fast, but let me slow down and say this again. He's saying, jalsatul istiraha قبل القيام إلى الركعة الثانية والرابعة. It's before you stand up to go into the second rak'ah, and also it's before you stand up to go into the 4th rak'ah. All right? There's a sitting that you can do. So you pray 1 rak'ah. All right? You stand, bow, go through all the positions of the prayer. All right? 2 prostrations. Now it's time to stand up for the second rak'ah. He's saying before you stand up for that second rak'ah, there's a sitting you do. It's called jalsatul istiraha. You sit. Okay? Likewise, let's say you prayed the 3rd rak'ah. You've already done the tashahhud al-awsat. You prayed you're on the 3rd rak'ah. You prayed it, you said Fatiha, whatever surah, you went through the positions, bowing, standing back up, 2 prostrations, sitting, etc. Now you're ready to stand for the 4th rak'ah. Let's say it's Dhuhr or Asr or Isha. Before you stand for the 4th rak'ah, you would sit, a sitting of rest. Istiraha means rest, to relax. Jalsatul istiraha, the sitting of relaxing, to take a rest, to take a breather, take a brief sitting, okay? It's not long like the tashahhud, it's just a brief sitting. And actually, there are no words that are reported that the Prophet would say there that are authentic, in that. It's just a brief sitting and then stand, okay? So he says this jalsa, he says it's sunnah, okay? And now here he's talking the wording of meaning of the sunan, meaning if you leave it out, okay, absent-mindedly, you don't make 2 rak'ahs for it. If you leave it out, 2 sajdas at the end of the prayer for sahwa for it. If you leave it out, it's not a rukn, it's not a pillar of the prayer, your prayer is still valid, okay? But it's of the sunan. If you do it, it is recommended. And he says, because لِأَنَّهَا ثَبِتَتْ بِفِعْلٍ, it's because it's been confirmed from the actions of the Prophet. So, the Prophet would do it. It's authenticated from the Prophet that he would sit for that jalsa, for that sitting. Okay. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah mentioned in his book Zad al-Ma'ad, Ibn al-Qayyim, he said that he understood that the Prophet ﷺ would do this when he got older. He said the Prophet would do this when he got older, meaning when he was younger, earlier in Islam, he didn't do it. But when he got older, he said because of his old age and being feebleness of body, he would do it. But Shaykh al-Albani refuted that in his footnotes to Sifat al-Salat al-Nabi. He said Ibn al-Qayyim said this, and alhamdulillah, we love Ibn al-Qayyim, rahmatullahi alayhi, may Allah have mercy upon him. But there's no dalil for that qawl of his. He has no proof, evidence for that. No one else said that, preceded him in saying that. So what we should understand is that the Prophet did it, and it's from the Sunnah to do it. Not that you have to be an old person and you can do it. No, anyone who does that, this is from the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. So he goes on. He said, وَلَا يَجِبُ مِنْ أَذْكَارِهَا إِلَّا التَّكْبِيرُ. And he says, and none of its words are obligatory, words of remembrance, words to remember Allah. We call it, say, adhkar, words to remember Allah, are obligatory. And then he's going to, except for, and then he's going to say what words are obligatory to say. A takbir. That's saying Allahu Akbar. Okay. So here, regarding this, in the notes, what he says, fi kulli khafd wa rafa'. Means saying Allahu Akbar every time you go down or come up, saying Allahu Akbar. And he says, وَكَذَا أَذْكَارُ الرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ. And likewise the wordings of the ruku' and the sujood. The wording when you're in ruku', you say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. When you're in sujood, you say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. And when you ruku' is bowing. So when you're bowing, you say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, glory be unto my Lord, the most magnificent, like this, something of that meaning. And when you're in sajda, sujood, when your head is on the floor, prostrating like this, you say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, glory be unto my Lord, who is the most high. Okay? He's saying these words also. He said these words also these words also have the same ruling as these takbirat. The thing about these saying the takbirat, these things are not arkaan. He's saying they're wujub. He said la yajibu min adhkariha illa. He said nothing is obligatory of his words except for, now he's naming, so he's doing the opposite. He's naming the things that are obligatory. That's what I want you to understand from this. So saying Allahu Akbar between the positions, that's obligatory. It's of the Waajibaat. Not of the Arkaan, but it's of the Waajibaat. Okay? And saying the words of remembering Allah when you're in bowing and when you're in prostration, he said these also are of the Waajibaat. Saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim when you're bowing, saying Subhana Rabbi al-A'la when your head is on the floor prostrating, these are of the obligatory things. He said the proof of it is the statement of the Prophet. Somewhere he said, وَأَمَّا الرُّكُوعُ فَعَذِّمُوا فِيهِ الرَّبْ وَأَمَّا السُّجُودُ فَاجْتَهِدُوا فِيهِ بِالدُّعَاءِ قَمِنٌ أَن يُسْتَجَابَ لَكُمْ رواه Muslim. So in this hadith, the Prophet he said in reference to bowing, then glorify Allah, meaning say Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. And in reference to prostrating, then make a lot of effort to say a lot of words of supplication in it. For verily it is likely that your dua will be accepted when you're in prostration. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim. But the reason he's saying that is because the Prophet gave a command to say it. So he said, Al-Amr, going back, Al-Amr yufidul wujub. The command shows us it's an obligation, it's obligatory, because the Prophet commanded to say that when you're in sujood, etc., and so forth. Okay. Now, in reference to the first takbir though, we didn't mention the first takbir. The takbir to open the prayer, what about that one? Because there are takbirat, okay? It's a rukin. It's a pillar. And the proof of it is in the hadith of the Musi'i Salat, the one who prayed badly. There's a hadith where the Prophet, there was a man who entered the prayer on authority, Abu Hurairah, the hadith is inside Bukhari. A man entered the masjid, and the Prophet was sitting at the side of the masjid, and he prayed, and he came to the Prophet, he gave the Prophet the greetings, assalamu alaikum, and the Prophet said, wa alayka salam. He said, go back and pray, for verily you have not prayed. Innaka lam tusalli. He said, go back and pray, for innaka lam tusalli, for verily you have not prayed. So the man went back and he prayed again. And he came back and gave salam to the Prophet. The Prophet said, wa alayka salam. He said, go back and pray, for innaka lam tusalli, verily you are not praying. And so they said it happened a second time. And after that, the man told me, he said, teach me, O Messenger of Allah, teach me how to pray. And the Prophet told him about the prayer, what to do. In that hadith, the scholars get the arkaan, the pillars of the prayer, because the Prophet told him those things that are arkaan in the prayer. So he said, إِذَا قُمْتَ لِلصَّلَاةِ, when you stand for the prayer, he says, "Taqbil al-qibla, face the qibla, wa kabbir," and say Allahu Akbar. And then he went through what to do. So that first takbir, the scholars consider that a rukin, takbir to ihram, the one that enters you into the prayer. Okay, but the others after it, between the positions, they're of the wajibat. They're not of the arkan. Okay, yeah.
Aside question, is it correct for some people who hold the position that reciting other than Fatiha is from the
Okay, inshallah, ma tayassara laka min al-Quran or something like this. Yeah, inshallah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. It's coming. It's coming, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, that's a very good question, but it's coming. We're going to discuss it. But hold that, inshallah. Okay, so except for the takbir, so he's saying everything, all the wordings are not obligatory except for the takbirat. Okay, so he says wal-Faatihah fi kulli raka'ah, and saying al-Faatihah in every raka'ah, reciting Surah al-Faatihah in every raka'ah. And he says he said walau kana mu'tamman, even for the one who's being led in prayer, that they must recite the Faatihah. So there's something we want to mention here about this. He pointed out. In reference to the Faatihah. So the Faatihah, he's saying here it's of the Waajibaat, but other scholars say it's of the Arkaan, the pillars. And Sheikh bin Baz and also Sheikh Al-Albani, they say it's of the pillars. Okay, the reason they say it's of the pillars and not of the Waajibaat is because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La salata liman lam yaqra bi Fatihatil Kitab." Okay, there's no salat for the one. Oh, kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam ma'ana. There's no salat for the one who does not recite the opening chapter of the book. Okay, so in him saying that, that's showing that the prayer is not valid for one who does not recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, now there's a difference of opinion regarding whether the person is leading the prayer or whether the person is following someone in one of the prayers that are out loud, this type of thing. Okay, so he says in reference to that, he says illa fima jahara fihi al-Imaam. He says except for reciting the Fatiha would be considered a pillar, except for the person in the situation when the Imam is reciting out loud. When the prayers where the Imam is reciting out loud, that would be like, for example, Salatul Fajr. That would be like, for example, the first 2 rak'ahs of Salatul Isha, the first 2 rak'ahs of Salatul Maghrib. The Imam is reciting out loud, okay? So in those prayers, he's saying that's an exception to this rule about the Fatiha being a rukn, okay? And he says, لِقَوْلِهِ, he's giving the proof, due to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, مَنْ كَانَ لَهُ إِمَامٌ فَقِرَاءَةُ الْإِمَامِ لَهُ قِرَاءَةٌ رواه أحمد وصححه الألباني في صحيح الجامع. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever has an imam, then his imam's recitation is the recitation for him. And this hadith was reported by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad, and Shaykh Al-Albani graded it Sahih in his hadith, his checking of Al-Jami' Saghir, which is called Sahih Al-Jami' Saghir, was ziyada. Okay? So it's an authentic hadith where the Prophet said that, and he's interpreting it to mean in the prayers when the imam is reciting out loud. And then he brings another narration. He said, وَلِقَوْلِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم, due to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, وَإِذَا قَرَأَ فَأَنْصِتُوا, when the imam was reciting, then you all be quiet and listen. رواه Abu Dawood وهو صحيح. He's reported by Imam Abu Dawood in his Sunan in his authentic hadith. So some of the scholars, of the contemporary scholars of these times who went with this opinion are, for example, Shaykh Al-Albani in Sifat Salat al-Nabi, he holds this opinion. Shaykh Al-Albani mentions this in Sifat Salat al-Nabi. But in reference to the prayers where the imam is silent, you have to, even Albani has the opinion that you have to, the person who is following, he has to recite the Fatiha. Okay, he has to recite the Fatiha. But if he's talking about when the imam is reciting out loud, then he's saying the imam's recitation is recitation for you. Sheikh bin Baz, also Sheikh Salih Fawzan holds that position. Salih Fawzan said the same thing, that if the imam is reciting, then you're supposed to be quiet and listen to his qira'ah. But now Sheikh bin Baz has a lengthy fatwa. He gave, when he asked this, he gave a lengthy fatwa where he went into all of these adillah, and he brought a narration that is in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, where the Prophet ﷺ, he turned to his companions after the prayer, and he asked them, he said, perhaps you all recite behind your imam, because he said he felt like he was being, I guess not confused, but like he was being disturbed in his prayer when he was reciting. He says, "Oh, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَقْرَؤُونَ خَلْفَ إِمَامِكُمْ بِهَذَا الْمَعْنَى." Maybe you all reciting behind your imam. And they said, yes, we do, you know. And he said, don't do it. He said, إِلَّا بِفَاتِحَةِ الْكِتَابِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا صَلَاةَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَقْرَأْ بِهَا. He said, except for the Fatiha. He said, except for the Fatiha, but he said, verily there's no salat for the one who does not recite the Fatiha. You know, it's a hadith, yeah. So Sheikh bin Baz brings this hadith, and he says this hadith explains those other hadiths. So he says, even though the imam is reciting the Fatiha out loud, you have to recite al-Fatiha. And he said in reference to where you say it, he said, if you know the imam gives a pause between his Fatiha and between the surah that comes after it, long enough for you to recite it, then you wait and you try to recite it after that, okay? Or he said you can recite it along with the imam after he recites the ayat. Or he said you can wait till he finishes the reciting the Fatiha, and then when he starts reciting his other surah, then you recite the Surah al-Fatiha, because you have an exception about listening to it, because the Fatiha, you have to recite it. And then after that, you do for ansitu, like the Prophet says, then be quiet, you know. This is how Sheikh bin Baz, answered that, you know. So, nah. You gonna say something? So I mean, there's just there's a lot of different opinions. There are different opinions about it. Different opinions about it, of course. Okay, but in general, just know that you should recite Surah Al-Faatihah in the prayer. You shouldn't just be standing there. You should say Surah Al-Faatihah. Okay. So Tayyib, there was something else that I wanted to mention regarding that, and it'll probably come to me later, inshallah. So then he goes on. He says, "Wa Tashahhud al-akhir." The final tashahhud, okay? The final tashahhud, the person must make the final tashahhud. The final tashahhud actually is considered a rukn. And some of these things will come at the end. We're going to go over, and I don't know how we're doing on time. We may have to continue this next week, inshallah, which is fine. That's no problem. We can continue next week because I was going to try to go through. I don't know why I was being very optimistic, thinking I'm going to get to the Arkaan and the Waajibaat and the Sunan, and it's looking at how we're going along now. We're only 2 slides in. We probably will be good if we can finish these Arkaan, So, but when we get to the end of it, what I was going to do is go through, after we go through what Imam Ash-Shawkaanee says, Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book, Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah li'amatul-Ummah, he summarizes all of these things. These are the Arkaan, these are the Shurut, these are the Arkaan, these are the Waajibaat, these are the Sunan. And so we'll go through and read them back, go through and compare what he's saying to what we've discussed from Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, okay? Because one thing about Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, he mentions, when he talks about Arkaan, he mentions them as though they're a Waajibaat, okay? And so the things that he does say in the metan, in the text, and the things that he says that they're not wajib, he'll say the things that are not wajib, he's saying things that are not Arkaan, but they could be of the Waajibat or the Sunan. In other words, he puts the Sunan and the Waajibat together, and he refers to things that are of the Arkaan, he'll mention them as being wajib. You understand? So he's saying like there's Waajibat, which are Arkaan, and then everything else is Sunnah, which includes Waajibat and Sunan for what other people's terminology. So we'll go back and through at the end with the terminology that I mentioned to you before and categorize all of these things and make it more clear for you, inshallah. Okay? And then he says, what Tasleem, the Tasleem, which is saying, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah at the end of the prayer. Okay? We say to the right and to the left, etc., like this. This is of the pillars of the prayer also. This is of the pillars of the prayer. Okay? So he says, and in the footnotes, the Sharih, he says, التسليمة الأولى فقط لاقتصاره صلى الله عليه وسلم عليها أحيانا. He says the first tasleem, saying it once to one side, is a rukn. Because sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would only do that. He wouldn't. Sometimes he said ahyanan, sometimes the Prophet wouldn't do it to both sides. He did it just to one side. Now don't make that your established sunnah, that you get in front of the people and every time you lead in the salat you say assalamu alaikum and get up and walk away. They'll think you're crazy and they'll be ready to beat you up and drag you out the masjid as a deviant. Okay, even though because the knowledge is not as muntashir, as wide of the sunnah is not widespread amongst the people. A lot of things are not that are from the sunnah. Most of the Muslims recognize it now as evil. And things that are evil, the people think it's the sunnah. Bid'ah they think is sunnah, and then stuff that's sunnah they think is innovation. Because it's from the lack of the knowledge is not spread like it used to be in the time of the Prophet and the Sahaba, etc., in the time of the Salaf, the early Imams. Okay, but if your person says Assalamu alaikum, and ends their prayer with that, and only said it once, then the prayer is accepted like that. The prayer is valid like that because he said because it's confirmed from the Prophet that he did that. He said ahyanan. Occasionally the Prophet did that. Okay. There are also narrations where the Prophet would say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to one side, to the right, and then just Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the left. Okay, that's also from the Sunnah. Even though a lot of people don't practice it, most of the Imams who lead the prayer, they say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to right and to the left, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, but there are other ways the Prophet did it, and that are in the authentic hadith that is not just that wording. Okay, you understand? So that's the point we want to make here. All right. And if you want to refer back to the details of those wordings, go see Shaykh Al-Albani's book, Sifatul Salat al-Nabi. He brings all those different ways the Prophet would make the tasleem with the different variations of the wordings and where those narrations are found and the authentication of those narrations. Okay. And he says, وَمَا عَدَى ذَلِكَ فَسُنَن. And he says, and things other than that, then they are sunan. They are optional acts, sunan acts. Okay. So he goes into those. He says, وَالرَّفْعُ فِي الْمَوَادِعِ الْأَرْبَعِ الرَّفْعُ فِي الْمَوَادِعِ الْأَرْبَعِ. Raising the hands in the 4 places. Raising the hands in the 4 places. So what are these? He says in the notes, the Sharih, he says, in the takbiratul ihram, that's when in the opening takbir, وعند الركوع, and when you bow, okay, وَالرَّفْعُ مِنْهُ, and standing up after bowing, وَعِنْدَ الْقِيَامِ إِلَى الرَّكَةِ الثَّالِثَةِ, and when you stand up for the third raka'ah. And he goes on to say, he says, وَثَبِتَ الرَّفْعُ بَيْنَ السَّجْدَتَيْنِ أَحْيَانًا. And he says, also confirmed from the Prophet ﷺ that sometimes he would raise his hands between the two sajdas. He said, أَحْيَانًا. You all understand? So between two sajdas, between two bowings, like you go down into sujood, right? Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. You come back, Allahu Akbar. He said sometimes the Prophet would raise his hands there. He said, Ahyanan. He said it's confirmed from the Prophet, Ahyanan, sometimes that he would do that, okay? So just as a point, like I said, sometimes you see some of these things that are from the Sunnah, that are in the authentic hadith books, that are, the scholars of hadith have graded how authentic, and they're in the hadith books, and they're in the books of fiqh, etc. And the people don't know about it, and they see you doing it, and they'll think you're crazy. They think you're majnoon, think you're crazy. But it's from the Sunnah, okay? All right. But the preserved Sunnah from him are those, as he says, al-Mawadi al-Arba, the 4 places, all right? So then next he says, wad-Dhamm, okay? Ad-Dhamm, regarding that, this is placing the right hand over the left, okay? He says, al-Yameen ala shimal, the right over the left, ala sadr, he says on the chest, وَقَدْ جَعَلَهَا بَعْضُهُمْ وَاجِبًا لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم نحن معشر الأنبياء أمرنا أن نضع أيماننا على شمائلنا في الصلاة أخرجه الطيالسي وصححه ابن حبان والألباني في الصحيحة. So he says, based upon a hadith of the Prophet, he says some scholars went with the opinion that placing the right hand on the left is wajib, it's obligatory. Okay, he says some scholars said it's obligatory, it's not just sunnah, meaning mustahab, but it's wajib. He said due to the statement of the Prophet, he said, نحن معشر الأنبياء, we, the group of the prophets, أمرنا أن نضع أيماننا على شمائلنا, we were commanded to place our right hands over our left hands, this salah, in the prayer. Okay, this hadith was reported by Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, and Ibn Hibban graded authentic, and also Shaykh al-Albani graded authentic in a Sahihah, and Silsilat Hadith al-Sahihah. Then he also brings another narration. He says, وعن سهل بن سعد رضي الله عنه, it's reported from Sahal bin Sa'ad, may Allah be pleased with him, قال, he said, كان الناس يؤمرون أن يضع الرجل اليد اليمنى على ذراعه اليسرى في الصلاة. He said, the people, we were commanded, he's a companion, a Sahabi, he said in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the man was commanded, we were commanded that a man must place his right hand on his left arm in the prayer. And قال Abu Hazim, he said, أحد الرواة, and he's one of the narrators, he said, لا أعلمه إلا ينمي ذلك عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And he said, I do not know anything other than that he was referring to when he said we were commanded, meaning the Prophet commanded us that. He was implying the Prophet commanded us to do this, place our right hands on our left. Okay. Now, in reference to, there's something else in the notes here that I want to mention regarding that, in the footnotes to this Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah about Ad-Dhamm. And there's a dhamm that's placing, al-qabda, which is grasping or placing. It can be done either way. Some of the narrations mention grasping the left hand with the right, and the wrist, right? And some mention placing one on the other. So it could be placing or grasping, holding. All right, qabda, dhamm, either one. Although there are narrations that imply both, and the scholars say both are from the Sunnah either way. Okay, so he says, Ash-Shawkaanee says in Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah, his explanation of his own book, his own metin. He says, وَأَمَّا الضَّمِّ لِلْيَدَيْنِ الْيُمْنَى عَلَى الْيُسْرَى حال القيام إما على الصدر أو تحت السرة أو بينهما. Okay. Ash-Shawkaanee, he says, in reference to placing the hands, the right over the left, while one is standing, he said that is either on the chest, or it is below the navel, or it is between the two. Okay. It is between the two. And in the notes he goes on, he says, اعلم أن الإرسال لم يثبت عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا عن أصحابه بل ثبت الضم بالروايات الصحيحة ثابتة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعن أصحابه. Okay, he says no. Okay, so in reference to on the chest, below the navel or between the two. Okay, this is a lot of the scholars of the past and the books of fiqh of the Salaf, you'll see all of these mentioned. Okay, all right. Now, a lot of the scholars today, the contemporary scholars, a lot of them, they say the chest is more authentic because of the narration of Wa'il, where he mentioned that he said, Salaytu ma'a Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I prayed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and wada'a yad al-yumna ala yad al-yusra ala sadrihi. He placed his right hand, and he was placing his right hand on his left hand on his chest, meaning when he was standing in the prayer. Okay, so Shaykh al-Albani, he's of those scholars that consider these the most authentic narrations. There are other reporters also who mentioned on the chest. But there's some discussion even about some of those narrations in reference to how authentic they are. Most of them, when we're talking about the sihha, the authenticity of them, when looking at them, the individual narrations will have weaknesses in them, something wrong with them. But to collectively, Shaykh al-Albani, when he talks about them, he's saying that when he's saying sahih, he means sahih li ghayrihi. It's authentic due to other it has shawahid, other supporting narrations. Okay. And there are other narrations from some of the tabi'een that mention that show that they would pray with their hands in other places, not on their chest, like below the navel, on the navel. You'll find these books in some of the the Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba. He brings narrations like this, and Ad-Durar they bring narrations like this, and those narrations, they have authentic chains to them. So the reason I'm saying this is that one should not be strict or harsh or mean to the person about where his hands are. And the issue that's of obligation, those narrations that mention it as being an obligation, is that it was placing right hand on the left. But in reference to the narrations that specify on the chest or below the navel, they're different wording. They're different narrations. And most of them are not authentic. Okay, but Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Al-Albani, these great scholars, like even Sheikh Muqbil rahimahumullah jami'an, may Allah have mercy upon all of them, they all seem to hold the opinion that the stronger narrations show that even though they have some weakness in them, the placing of the hands on the chest from the Prophet ﷺ, they're stronger than the other narrations that mention below the navel and things like this. And for more discussion on that, inshallah, we talk to Ustadh Jibreel, inshallah, if he has some more information. The guy who's holding the bachelor's degree in hadith, he can help us. But this is just from my limited knowledge, what I've learned over the years, from my little small studies. So tayyib, so anyway, so he goes on. And the other point I want to make, he's mentioning in the footnotes here, Muhammad Subhi Hassan Hallaq, what he's saying here is that placing the right hand on the left is what is confirmed from the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Okay, and that is in standing. And he said there's nothing confirmed from the Prophet or his companions that they dangle al-irsal. We say irsal, meaning dangling the arms in the prayer. He said there's nothing confirmed from the Prophet or the companions that they ever let their arms hang to the side while they were in salah. The only thing that's confirmed from the Prophet and his companions was right hand over the left. Now they differ some. There are narrations about on the chest, like I said, below the navel, between the two, under the chest. But as far as dangling the arms, there's nothing confirmed from the Prophet or any of the Sahaba that they dangled their arms on the right and the left in the salat while they were standing. Okay, the position in standing is right hands on the left. Okay, all right. Tayyib. Inshallah, we'll conclude with this, with this slide here. There's more, obviously, but for the sake of time, we'll stop with this and we'll pick up next week. So then he goes on. He says, "What tawajjuh ba'da takbirah," also saying an opening supplication after the takbirah. He's talking about takbirat ihram. Saying Allahu Akbar to begin the prayer. There's a pause there, and there's dua that you say there before you recite Surat al-Faatihah. Okay, this is also from the Sunan from the Sunan. It's a sunnah of the prayer. Okay, the most well known of them is the narration of Ibn Mas'ud, what's the narration? Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika. No, not the Subhanallah. What's no, not wajahtu. What's the? No, not this one. Say it again. Begin again. I have to remember. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu. No, that's not. That's something else. What's say it again? No. That's not anything. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa tabaraka asmuka wa ta'ala jadduka wa la ilaha ghayruka. This is it. Everybody's yelling every dua they know. What about this one? No. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa tabaraka asmuka wa ta'ala jadduka wa la ilaha ghayruka. This is the most popular, okay? This is the most popular. And I believe the narrator, the Rawi, is also Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. The chain of narration for it is, if I remember correctly, Hassan. It's Hassan. Okay, so it's not even the most authentic, but it's become the most popular amongst the people. And in most of the Salat books, that's the one that everybody knows. That's the one that's in all of the Salat books. But it's not. But it's the most famous. But it's not the most authentic. The one. اللهم باعد بيني وبين خطاياي كما بعدت بين المشرق والمغرب اللهم نقني من خطاياي كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس اللهم اغسلني من خطاياي بالماء والثلج والبرد. This one is more authentic من حيث السند, in reference to من حيث الصحة, صحة السند, in reference to the authenticity of its chain of narration, it's more authentic, but it's just longer. So maybe that's why they don't put it in the books for the new Muslim people to learn to make salat. It's longer. There's also one, and that one, I'm saying these and I'm not telling what they mean. Okay, so subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa tabaraka ismuka. So glory be unto you, Allah, and praises due to you. Blessed is your name. Wa ta'ala jadduka, and exalted is your majesty. Wa la ilaha ghayruka, and there's nothing to deserve to be worshipped except for you. That's the most common one you'll see in the books that teach you how to pray. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's authentic. It's just not, the chain. Like I said, it's not the most authentic one, but it's hasan. It's good. It's an authentic, reliable one to say.
Many people that read on the prayers, they do not make
Go on.
because they otherwise, some people they just start with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Well, let me say this. There are some of these that are these du'as for istiftah, opening the prayer before the Fatiha. They're very short. Like there's one where the Prophet said, Allahu Akbar kabiran, walhamdulillahi kathiran, wa subhanallahi bukratan wa asila, and that's it. And it's authentic, That's so maybe the person is saying it, but they're saying it's the sunnah is not to say it out loud, so you don't know that they're saying it, but it's very short, just a couple of sentences, So that doesn't mean they're not doing it. They're just not doing the longer one that you used to. But that doesn't mean that they're not doing it. Only way to be for sure, though, is to ask them, hey, what are you saying after that? But other than that, we assume that they're saying it. Yeah.
It's a Sunan anyway, right?
Yeah, and even if they leave it off, it's not of the obligations of the Sunan acts. It's not of the Waajibaat, and it's not of the pillars. So even if you don't say it, your prayer is valid, and you don't have to make two sajdas after the prayer for leaving it out or anything like that, okay? It just makes the prayer, it's better, it's recommended, okay? So there was a point I was getting ready to make. So then the other one, Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khataya kama ba'adta bayna al-mashriqi wal maghrib. Oh Allah, separate between me and my sins, just as you separate the distance as you have separated the distance between the east and the west. Allahumma naqini min khataya kama yunaqqa ath-thawb al-abyad min ad-danas. Oh Allah, cleanse me from my sins just like you cleanse a white garment from impurity, from dirt. Okay. And Allahumma ighsilni min khataya bil ma'i wa thalji wal barad. Oh Allah, wash me of my sins with water and snow and hail, like this. Okay, so that's the meaning of that. Okay, so there are many more. Like I said, referred to Sifat al-Salat Nabi by Shaykh al-Albani, the Prophet's prayer described, and he brings a lot of them. I want to say it's more than 10. He brings like 10 or more than 10 or 12 of them like this that are authentic from the Prophet that you can choose to say. And he mentions that the sunnah is to learn multiple ones of them and alternate. Say different ones. Don't just say one all the time. Because what happens when you say one thing all the time like that? Well, yeah, the sunnah will become lost, and then also the person won't even be thinking about what they're saying. Blah, 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 because that's the one they say all the time. Blah, 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 blah. They're not even thinking about what it means. And I'm not saying that you can't say, if you are saying the same one over, that it makes your prayer invalid or anything. But just to be closer to the sunnah, the Prophet taught different ones, so learn different ones. That's closer, being closer to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's from the Quran.
No, it's from a verse in the Quran, isn't it? Yeah.
Except
No.
at the end.
It's different at the end.
Well, ana min al-mushriki. Ana.
It's
At the end, it's a little bit different, right?
And it's in Shaykh al-Bani brings in Sifat al-Salat Nabi. It's in there. Yeah, it's in there. He brings, like I say, about, I want to say it's at least a dozen, maybe like a dozen of them. That's one of them also. So refer back to these, books where, and if you have a Salat book, just make sure it has a reference to authentic hadith, because some of the books that I know that were being printed years ago when I was a new Muslim, they had a bunch of stuff in there that we found out later on this stuff was based on weak and fabricated hadith, So just make sure it's a reference for it, that what hadith book is this in, or so we can at least confirm that it's from the statements of the Prophet. So then he says, what ta'awudh is seeking refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the Shaytaan before reciting Surat al-Faatihah. He mentions this also. There was something we are gonna get through this slide, I promise you. Ta'awudh, yeah. He says as a reference to ta'awudh, he says it's wajib. Saying A'udhu billahi min ash-Shaytaan ir-Rajeem before you recite Surat al-Faatihah. He's saying this is not sunnah, this is wajib. Okay. He says لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى, due to the statement of Allah the Most High, where he says فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ Surah Al-Nahl. Okay. When you want to recite the Quran, seek refuge with Allah from the shaitan, the cursed shaitan. Okay. So it's wajib. And Shaykh al-Albani and Shaykh bin Baz both said you're supposed to say it at the beginning of every raka'ah before you start Surah Al-Fatihah. Okay. I don't know if you all know, but in some of the Salat books that are available in English, they'll say to say it in the first raka'ah, but after that they leave it out. Okay. No, it's considered wajib from the wajibat of the prayer. And Al-Albani and Shaykh bin Baz, like I said, both of them said because of that ayat, you say at the beginning of every raka'ah. When you stand to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, you always say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan. Does Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen mention it?
Because he mentioned something about the supplication of the dua you say at the beginning of
Al-Fatiha?
the Al-Fatiha, and then he mentioned about
The ta'awudh, he said something? I can't remember.
about every raka'ah like that.
I can't remember what Shaykh Uthaymeen's opinion is about. Do you know, Jibril? I can't remember. But I know for sure Bin Baz and both Albani both held that position. Shaykh Uthaymeen, I can't remember. I would have to go back and look and see. And then, so the next thing, he says, saying Aameen, a ta'meen. A ta'meen is saying Aameen after the Al-Fatiha. So he says in reference to a ta'meen, he says it's wajib. It's not sunnah. He says saying ta'meen is wajib. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا قال الإمام غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين فقولوا آمين رواه البخاري. So he says, based on the statement of the Prophet, when the Prophet said, when the Imam says غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, then you all say Ameen. And this goes back to that principle in usul al-fiqh, al-amru yufid al-wujub. A command is showing obligation, unless there's something to show that contradictory to that, which proves that command is just recommended, because some commands are for istihbab. But if there's nothing to show otherwise, then the command means wujub, obligation. So he's saying, therefore, it's obligatory to say Ameen after you recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Wala dhalin, Ameen, okay? And then he says, وَقِرَاتُ غَيْرُ الْفَاتِحَةِ مَعَهَا. Reciting other than Al-Fatiha along with it, that is from the Sunan. It's not of the Waajibaat. He says of the Sunan. It's not of the Waajibaat. Okay? So tayyib, inshallah, we'll stop with that. I think I hear the adhan being called out there. We'll have to continue next. So next week, we will continue, inshallah, what's left of talking about these Arkaan and the Waajibaat and the Sunan. And then we'll go through what Sheikh bin Baz explains in reference to numbering them out so you can see a detailed list of what each one of these things are and categorizing them, making it easy for you. And I know it's hot in here. Alhamdulillah, I commend you all on your patience with the heat and the uncomfortable conditions. And may Allah bless you for participating and increase you in knowledge and forgive us all for our sins and accept our intentions for this righteous deed of benefiting, learning from our religion. So we'll start with that. Oh yeah. So what was the thing about so you were saying the hadith about the man who prayed badly? Yeah, it's right here. Hold on a second. Okay. So tayyib. So here's the hadith. It's on Sahih Bukhari, also in Sahih Muslim, an Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. This is the hadith of Musiya Salat, the one who prayed badly. So this is the wording of it. He says that an Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, it's reported from Abu Hurairah that he said, may Allah be pleased with him, أن الرجل دخل المسجد, a man entered the masjid. وَرَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ جَالِسٌ فِي نَاحِيَةِ الْمَسْجِدِ. The Prophet was sitting at the side of the masjid. فَصَلَّى ثُمَّ جَاءَ فَسَلَّمَ عَلَيْهِ. So the man prayed and then he came and gave salam to the Prophet. فَقَالَ لَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. The Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said to him, وَعَلَيْكَ السَّلَامُ إِرْجِعْ فَصَلِّ فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ. The Prophet said, go back and وَعَلَيْكَ السَّلَامُ, go back and pray, for verily you have not prayed. So فَقَالَ فِي الثَّانِيَةِ, so the man did that a second time, or الَّتِي بَعْدَهَا, or the one third time after that. The narrator, he's saying it was either the man either did that 2 or 3 times. The man said to the Prophet, عَلِّمْنِي يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. He said, teach me, O Messenger of Allah. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. فَقَالَ, so the Prophet said, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَأَسْبِغُ الْوُضُوء. So when you stand up, get ready to pray, make the wudu properly, complete your wudu. ثُمَّ اسْتَقْبِلِ الْقِبْلَةِ, then face the qibla. فَكَبِّرْ, then say Allahu Akbar. ثُمَّ اقْرَأْ بِمَا تَيَسَّرَ مَعَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, then recite what is easy for you from the prayer. Okay? And so then he said, ثُمَّ ارْكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا, then bow until you come to rest, all your joints come to rest in bowing. ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَسْتَوِيَ قَائِمًا, then stand back up until you are standing all the way back up straight in rest. ثُمَّ اسْجُدْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا, then prostrate until you go down in sajda, until you all your bones come to relaxation. You have طمأنينة, and means all your joints come into a relaxed position in prostration. ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ جَالِسًا, then sit back up until all your bones and joints come to rest in sitting. ثُمَّ اسْجُدْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا. So the Prophet's going through all, then prostrate until but in reference to what he said, recite, after he told him, say Allahu Akbar, say Allah, he said, استقبل القبلة فكبر, face the qibla, and then say Allahu Akbar. Then he said, ثُمَّ اقْرَأْ مَا تَيَسَّرَ لَكَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ, then recite whatever is easy for you from the Qur'an. So the scholars took from that, and that's why some of the scholars, like the Hanafiya of the Ahnaf, the scholars of the Hanafi madhab, say it's not obligatory to recite al-Fatiha, because they said in this hadith, the Prophet just said recite whatever is easy for you from the Qur'an. But the scholars say the other hadith is more specific, where the Prophet said there's no salat for the one who does not recite the Fatiha of the prayer. So this means recite the Fatiha of the prayer. You have to at least recite the Fatiha of the prayer. Anything else after that, okay, but you have to at least recite the Fatiha. If you don't, the Prophet said, La salata liman lam yaqra bi fatihatil kitab. There's no prayer for the one who doesn't recite the opening chapter of the book. Okay. All right. I mean, where you at?
And then because of that, they're saying that even if the imam is reading loud, you have to listen, and then you have to read fast, and then you have to...
Right. Yeah, like Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, he said that you still have to say it even when the imam recites out loud. So for Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha, he said the person who's following in the prayer, he still has to recite Al-Fatiha to himself. Okay? He still has to, not in his mind, not thinking about it, he has to say it with his lips, but he just says it silently to himself, he said.
I know, but at the same
But-
time, they say you will have to wait the imam to finish.
Right, Sheikh bin, like I said before, Sheikh bin Baz said he said you can either wait. He said either you can wait for the imam to finish, and then try to say it before he begins reciting something else, or he said you can wait till he finishes, and he said when he's reciting another surah after Fatiha, you're saying Surah Al-Fatiha. You complete your Fatiha while he's saying another surah, or he said you can say it while the imam is reciting Al-Fatiha. So either way, there's either way. But now some scholars, though, like we said, some of the scholars, like Sheikh Al-Albani, also Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan, said if the imam recites out loud in those prayers, you don't recite Al-Fatiha when he's saying it out loud. Okay? They say the imam's salah, his qira'ah, his recitation is a qira'ah for you. It's your reciting. It's for you. Okay? So that's based off a hadith. It's in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. Sheikh Al-Albani graded authentic. But he said it's the prayer, your salah is valid like that, because there's an authentic hadith where the Prophet said for the one who has an imam, the imam's recitation is his recitation. And then the other narration where the Prophet said, وَإِذَا قَرَأَ فَأَنْصِتُوا, when the imam is reciting, then you all be quiet. They took from that okay, this is an exception to the general rule that you have to recite Al-Fatiha. If the imam is reciting Al-Fatiha out loud, then that's valid for you. Okay. But in those rak'ahs, the last two rak'ahs where the imam is reciting silently, then you have to say the Fatiha for yourself. Or in a 4 rak'ah prayer like Dhuhr and Asr, where you don't recite any of it out loud, then all 4 of those rak'ahs, even if you're following the imam, you would say Surah Al-Fatiha for yourself. Yeah. So these are the different views. I just want you all to understand the different opinions about how these hadiths are applied, and just understand that I myself, just being safe, and also based upon the hadith that Sheikh bin Baz mentioned when he answered this question that's in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, that Sheikh bin Baz said is authentic, where the Prophet specifically asked them, are you all reciting behind me when I lead you in prayer? And they said yes. And he said, don't do it. He said, except for the Fatiha of the Kitab. And then he said, for verily there's no salat for whoever does not recite it. So Sheikh bin Baz said, based upon that, every rak'ah, whether you're the imam or you're being led by another imam, whether it's out loud or not, you have to say Surah Al-Fatiha. I myself, personally, I follow that because the hadith is authentic. I trust Sheikh bin Baz regarding his authentication of that hadith. And it is in Sunan Abi Dawood. I've seen it there myself. It's there. And it's a specific explanation of the situation of what we're talking about, where something happened, where the Prophet told them what to do. So for me, that's sufficient, So but like I said, I'm not forcing anybody to my opinion. If what you understand to be what seems correct to you based upon evidence and so forth, then alhamdulillah, follow that. And la ba's bihi, no problem, inshallah. So inshallah, it's time for the salat. I think I heard the adhan.
Helpful you have somebody to show,
Yeah, inshallah, maybe we can put in some, since there is Wi-Fi here, maybe we can put in some little demonstration or something like that. I've seen some nice little demonstrations of the prayer, that you can see online that show you the positions and all that. There's one I saw that's real nice. It's in all Arabic. I probably have to translate it. But it's nice when it talks about do this and this is wrong. It shows the akhta, and it shows this is the right way, and then it shows the people doing it the crazy way. And it shows, so you... So inshallah, maybe I'll put that in, because we have Wi-Fi here, so we can click and watch, a presentation like that. So inshallah, next week we'll continue. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Yeah, it's cooking in here.